What's up, movie lovers? I'm Steven from the Hills Maniacs, and today I'm going to be continuing my series of reviews on the Rocky movie franchise. In this video, I will be talking about Rocky 2. So in this movie, we see that it's set a little bit after the first Rocky movie, where we saw Rocky Balboa, who was a local nobody pretty much, who occasionally did boxing matches here and there to gain money and everything else, ended up facing the world champion in basically a grudge match. I don't even think it was really a title match necessarily, but it was put together by the champion Apollo Creed. He wanted to face someone local for a publicity stunt kind of thing, and we see that Rocky went toe-to-toe with him and survived. He didn't win, but he survived and went all 15 rounds or whatever, and ended up getting a time limit draw, or I guess it'd be a time limit draw or whatever with Apollo Creed. And this movie pretty much picks up like right where that one left off, and I like the way that it kind of shows the two different ways that both of those characters came out of that fight. Like on one hand, we have Rocky, who is now getting more attention and fame and things like that. People coming up to him on the street, talking to him, and he's more popular around his neighborhood now because of his fight with Apollo Creed. And it wasn't even the fact that he survived, it's just because he did that in the first place and he got on TV and everything else. And I like that that made him more of like a star almost. Like people know him now that didn't know him really before. He wasn't that popular of a guy. He knew a couple people here and there, as we saw in the first movie, where he'd walk around town and talk to a specific person or whatever, or a group of people walking past him, whatever. Like he kind of knew people, but they didn't really know him. And now they know him because of this fight, and he's no longer this local nobody. He now has this publicity and everything else, where he's not really like this mega star yet or anything, but people are coming up to him and actually talking to him as if he's a celebrity now. And I kind of like that point of view. And then you get the flip side of that with Apollo Creed, where he is furious about his fight with Rocky because he didn't think there's no way someone like him could survive a fight with me. And then because Rocky did, that kind of throws Apollo off a little bit, and that kind of motivates Apollo Creed and all of his actions he takes in this movie, with him wanting to fight Rocky again. You know, I like that it showed the two different perspectives from these characters, how one is now becoming more popular and the other is starting to lose his popularity and fame because he was embarrassed by Rocky in that first fight. One of the main things I liked also about this movie was the fact that Rocky doesn't want to fight again because his girlfriend Adrian tells him that she thinks it's too dangerous, you know, he can get really hurt. Like he got really banged up from his first fight, and she doesn't want to see him get hurt again. And if he really loves her, he'll throw that aside in order to be with her and keep his relationship with her going, which we saw became a blossoming relationship in the first movie. I thought they did that in a perfect way, where they showed like his boxing career, but also like this is what his normal life is and his love life and everything else. And it built up to him finally getting his relationship with Adrian. And now in this movie, we see that she doesn't want him to do boxing anymore. She doesn't want him out there in those fights because it's dangerous and he could end up being killed from it or whatever. And he's kind of like torn between, well, this is my livelihood, this is what I choose to do with my life, but he also has to decide if he should sacrifice that in order to keep his relationship alive. And I kind of like that very human aspect of this character, where he is willing to do whatever Adrian says in order to make her happy, essentially. And that's why this works as not only a boxing movie or a sports movie even, but also just a love story in general. I think they did that really well in both of these first two Rocky movies. But then again, on the flip side, you have Apollo Creed, who wants to face Rocky again, despite the fact that in the first movie he told Rocky there won't be a rematch. But we realize in this movie that he wants a rematch with Rocky rather than Rocky wanting a rematch with him to possibly win the title this time. It's Apollo Creed who issued the challenge in the first movie, and now once again he's issuing the challenge in the second one. And you kind of see that contrast from the first movie, where Rocky wanted this fight and he was willing to do whatever it took. He was willing to put his body on the line and everything else, do all that training he could in order to get to this fight, whereas Apollo Creed was just like, I don't care about this. He wasn't really working out. He wasn't doing his usual training routine because he just thought this was going to be just like a couple-minute fight and he'd win real quick and get the publicity that he wanted. So you see that contrast in this movie where now Apollo Creed is the one that wants the fight with Rocky. Like, he's the one putting in the training now because he wants to take away that embarrassment that he suffered in the first movie. And I like that we get to see this different side of Apollo Creed, like what happens when he's embarrassed, because I don't even think he knew what he would be like or how he would respond to being embarrassed in this way. And now all he wants throughout this whole movie is this fight with Rocky, where Rocky doesn't want to fight, and then Apollo tries to use that as sort of discredit Rocky, like, oh, he's a coward, he doesn't want to do this. Meanwhile, at one point in the movie, Adrian falls into a coma, and we see a good chunk of the movie spent with Rocky in the hospital next to her, like waiting for her to recover, and even his manager is in there with him and stuff, like trying to convince him to go train for the fight, but Rocky doesn't want to because he loves Adrian that much, where he's spending all of his time by her bedside while she recovers from her coma, hoping that she will come out of her coma. And on the flip side of that, you get Apollo Creed, like I said, discrediting Rocky or trying to embarrass him on live TV by saying he's a coward, he doesn't want this fight, he's not really who he says he is and everything else. And he's doing all this publicity and stuff trying to get people to realize that Rocky is a fake, essentially. And that's not real, and Rocky doesn't really care about that because he cares about his relationship with Adrian, as I mentioned earlier. I just thought they did everything in this movie really well, showing not only that relationship side of things, but also the motivations of both characters are sort of reversed from the first movie. Because in the first movie, Rocky really wanted this fight and Apollo didn't care, and now in this movie, Apollo is the one who cares about the fight and Rocky doesn't at first. And I think my favorite scene is when Adrian finally wakes up from that coma and she says, go win this fight for me, and that's what inspires Rocky to take what little time he has left before the scheduled fight to train again and go out there and finally beat Apollo. And I like that this time around he actually does win the fight. He actually wins the championship and he gets that big hero moment that he would have gotten in the first movie, and that's why I like that they saved this until the second movie. Like I said, my favorite thing about the first movie was that they didn't have him win, but they had him survive, because that made a bigger impact than him just going out there and winning the championship, because it shows that sometimes you're not always going to get what you want, but you keep working at it until you do, and even when that day comes, you might not get it right away. And that was kind of the overall lesson of the first movie, and now this one, Rocky put in the time and had patience and everything else, and it showed that love is more important than his goals, I guess. Like his main thing he was focused on in this whole movie was his love for Adrian and making sure he was there for her, and now she got to be there for him to motivate him to finally win the championship after she woke up from her coma. I thought all of that was really well put together, and that's why I think this was a perfect sequel, not just for Rocky, or not just for this franchise, but just like a perfect sequel in general. Like, it almost could have stopped with this movie and it would have been fine. Like, I even said that about the first movie, where it could have been like a standalone movie and it would have been continued to be a classic, stuff like that, and didn't really need a sequel. But I like that we got a sequel. Now, I haven't seen any of the other movies yet. I do plan on covering them on this channel at some point as well. I'm going through and watching all the Rocky movies, so I don't know exactly how those hold up as sequels yet. But this one, for me personally, was just a perfect climax to this first story they were telling across both of these first two movies. And plus, I just like the fact that Apollo Creed overestimated Rocky yet again. Like, he still didn't see him as a threat. He still saw him as a fluke. He saw Rocky's survival in the first one as nothing but a fluke. And again, he let his own ego get the better of him, and that's what costs him the match, and he loses. It's this villain's comeuppance because of his own actions, because of his own ego, rather than Rocky just being better than him. Because it shows that Rocky didn't have to be better than Apollo Creed, he just had to outsmart him essentially, or let Apollo hurt himself in a way, or cost himself the fight because he wasn't focused on the right thing. He was just full of anger and rage and this bitterness from the first movie because he was embarrassed, and he wasn't focused on the fight itself. He just wanted to humiliate Rocky in the same way. And I like that that's how he gets foiled in this movie as well. And just seeing that celebration at the end with Rocky as champion, I think that was really impactful. And again, just like in the first movie, it did that like freeze frame thing at the end. It did that here with Rocky holding up the title and Adrian coming up to him and everything else. And I think it does set up the next movie perfectly, but I also think it could have been its own standalone movie as well, like I said. But let me know what you guys thought of the second movie in the Rocky franchise, and also the first one. If you haven't seen my review of the first Rocky movie, go check that out as well. When I plan on covering all 5 Rocky movies, and then of course Rocky Balboa, and I'll probably do the 3 Creed movies as well whenever I get around to those. So keep an eye out for all of that if you're a fan of these Rocky movies, and be sure to subscribe to this channel for everything we have going on. Thank you for watching the video, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.